Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Gitanjali Prakastha from Clean Energy Access Network, and today I'll be facilitating this session. So, Clean is conducting monthly webinars for quite some time now on multiple topics around clean energy and with vibrant speakers. So I would request everyone to keep checking Clean's social media website for more such interesting webinars, events, and updates, which usually keep coming across. So similarly, today's webinar is to discuss the climate finance for DRE intervention in the current scenario. This webinar will delve into the multifaceted domain of climate finance with a specific focus on its scope and future for the DRE sector in India. Our discussion will explore the proposed Indian carbon market and the existing international opportunities as well. So to discuss this, we have three esteemed speakers, which we have disclosed already in our posters. So Priyadarshini Karve, the CEO of Clean, Mr. Prantik Mitra, the Strategic Director of Micro Energy Credits, and Jasmeet Singh Bajaj, the Founder and Director of FCF India. So heartiest welcome to all of the speakers, and without any delay, let's start the session. For the Q&A or any comments, please feel free to drop your thoughts or queries in the chat box, and we can take it post each sessions, or you can wait for the last 5 to 10 minutes when the floor will be open for open discussion. So let's begin with our first speaker, Ms. Priyadarshini Karve. So Dr. Karve works on rural cooking energy solutions, decentralized organic waste to fuel technologies, and strategies for low carbon, sustainable, and urbanization. She developed the Samuchit carbon footprint calculator for urban Indians and conducts workshop and courses on climate change literacy. She's the founder, director of Samuchit Envirotech and a co-founder Urja Box. She's currently the national convener of Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change, and CEO of the Clean Energy Access Network. Her work has been honored by national and international awards and recognitions. In 2023, she was featured in Vigyan Vidushi, a book on 75 Indian women scientists luminaries, published by Vigyan Prasar for Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. So Ms. Karve will be discussing DRE as a multifaceted solution for climate crisis. And ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gitanjali. Let me share my screen. Hopefully that will work. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to not really talk about the existing climate finance options, but something that we are visualizing as we look at the future, because this as the climate crisis is unfolding, new processes are also coming in the picture. And at Clean, we believe that decentralized renewable energy can play a key role in addressing the climate crisis, and therefore is a sort of a prominent candidate for accessing climate finance, not just at present, but also going ahead in future. So the idea of decentralized renewable energy has evolved over time. For a long time, since about 1980s, it was thought of as a technology that will help remote areas access some basic energy services. So it was a technology meant to help remote areas and vulnerable communities to get some level of energy security. And the primary focus was on the cooking energy and lighting to start with, and then slowly it also shifted into some minor level of electrification. Some experiments were done around microgrids and so on, but this it was never considered to be a mainstream or an important player in the overall energy scenario. But that has changed in the last decade or so. We are now seeing decentralized renewable energy systems. These are being used as a distributed generation system, and I'm not just talking about electricity here, but also about fuel. So for example, there is this technology of making biogas from all kinds of waste materials, and then cleaning up the gas and filling cylinders, and this becomes a bio CNG. So it's an alternative to CNG, which can then get distributed for mass consumption. So those type of processes are also coming into play: pelletizing, biomass briquetting, and as well as solar, wind, micro hydro electricity generation, where the electricity is being fed into the grid. That seems to provide an attractive economic incentive for people to go in for these kind of systems. There are also places where people are looking at these type of rooftop systems or backyard systems for getting basic low carbon energy security. So these are the processes that typically an establishment or a household will move to by choice, often when it comes to urban areas also, where people are choosing to meet their energy requirements using low carbon or net zero systems. And then there is this entirely new area that is emerging, which is productive use of renewable energy, where a decentralized renewable energy system is designed to create livelihoods. To You can build a business model around it and earn income while providing variety of products and services to the local communities. So there are sort of different dimensions that are emerging around DRE, and it is becoming relevant not just for remote areas, but in general for rural areas, and also increasingly for urban setting. Now, this transformation, in a way, has been driven by the climate crisis. So, if you sort of look at historically how the climate discourse has evolved over the years, it was in the 90s when scientists started pointing out that if we want to solve this problem, if we want to reduce global rate of global warming, then we need to start reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. And that is the thought process which also drove the Kyoto Agreement in 2000s, which put conditions on developed countries which were at that point in time using majority of the fossil energy in the world, to reduce their own emissions by a certain percentage below 1990 level, and so on. And the mechanism which was designed, which would allow them to do that, was called clean development mechanism, and carbon markets evolved from that. I'm not going to talk about carbon markets because these are the topics which my fellow speakers will get into. But uh, to cut a long story short, we all know that Kyoto Agreement didn't really succeed. Global warming kept on increasing. We started increasingly experiencing the impacts of climate change, and that is the environment in which the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015 and then ultimately implemented in this decade. um, with Paris Agreement, along with these agreements and negotiations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been bringing out assessment reports. And the sixth assessment report, which also came out around the same time as Paris Agreement became operational, it clearly pointed out that the fossil fuel use globally must start dropping but from 2030 onwards, if we want to stay on track of the goal of keeping the increase in the Earth's average temperature to about 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. So this is no longer a requirement, or this is no longer a crisis that is going to come a few decades down the line or for the next generation or anything like that. This is something which we are talking about, which needs to happen in the next 6 years. So it is very much immediate. In 2023, that is last year, in COP28, which ironically happened in a country whose economy runs on petroleum energy, and still this crisis is now so obvious, and the need for reducing fossil fuels is so imminent that all the countries were sort of forced to accept. There was a political agreement which clearly stated that we need to start transitioning away from fossil fuels. Nowhere before this type of a statement had been made in any of the uh, COP declarations. So that itself shows that how necessary, everybody now agrees that this has become. But how do you operationalize? How do we start making this happen in the next 6 years? Because if you see the data, while the use of renewable energy has been increasing over the years, the use of coal and petroleum has also been increasing. So it is not that the renewable energy is replacing existing coal and petroleum use. It is just taking some share of the increasing energy use that has been happening year on year over the last couple of decades. Now, if we look at what efforts scientifically and technologically have come in order to address this problem, and this is something we started from 1990s. People started experimenting around two approaches. One is the renewable energy and the nuclear approach. But in the 2010s, there were several nuclear accidents, and there is, in general, the popular opinion went against the nuclear energy, and therefore its progress sort of slowed down, and all the focus came on to renewable energy. In 2010s, we also saw that the manufacturing capacity increased, costs came down, and for the first time it actually became economically attractive to invest in renewable energy than in fossil energy. We are seeing that from this multiple options have emerged. One is the large RE option, which is more popular in the from the climate perspective. But the decentralized renewable energy also started gaining traction because of all of these climate discourses and climate realities that had started hitting people. So this whole distributed and decentralized renewable energy is something which has emerged in the last decade or so, mainly pushed by the climate crisis. The advantages are it provides you localized generation, localized services, energy services, and at the same time, you can also feed into the centralized distribution. It is sustainable, equitable, net zero. And it is also the solution for just transition, because as we create a situation where fossil fuel industry starts winding down, many people are going to become jobless. So new jobs have to be created locally, and that is also happening increasingly in the DRE sector. So this is the scenario that is unfolding over the last decade or so, and this will increasingly move forward. Under Paris Agreement, countries had given original commitments for action to be taken for 5 to 10 years. In 2025, countries will have to come out with new commitments, and it is pretty obvious that the new commitments will have to focus not only on reducing emissions but also on adaptation. because as I said, the climate impacts have started appearing everywhere across the world. Even the developed world has faced natural disasters. So suddenly everybody is more aware that we need to also take care of adaptation. Now, these are just some examples of how decentralized renewable energy can help in mitigation. I mean, everybody talks about large RE as a sure shot and quick way of getting carbon credits or reduction in carbon emission. But these distributed systems also can play a significant role with a variety of technologies. But more importantly, DRE also helps in adaptation, because it creates local livelihoods, it creates local energy security, it is creating civic services which are driven by local energy, and also disaster shelters, for example, getting electricity through solar panels and so on. So disaster response also is becoming more sort of sure shot using DRE technology. So that is something which large RE doesn't have. Um, so this is basically the comparison. I mean, typically we always tend to think about renewable energy versus fossil energy, but there is this comparison that also needs to be drawn between large renewable energy versus decentralized renewable energy. Large RE systems will give you quick wins on mitigation, but increasingly people have, I mean, there are case studies which show that there is land use change leading to ecosystem destruction, loss of livelihoods, displacement for project affected is also linked with large RE systems. On the other hand, DRE is giving you more multifaceted solutions to climate change. It helps in mitigation, it helps in adaptation, it helps in building resilience. DRE systems can blend with natural ecosystems, as well as the human scapes, like a rooftop system doesn't become an eyesore. It provides local energy security, local livelihood generation. The only thing which is hampering its rapid expansion is that both policy and finance are focusing more on large RE and less on DRE. So we need enabling policy environment, and we need financing instruments which are designed for DRE systems. If that happens, then actually the right kind of an energy scenario which will give us climate solution as well as energy equity is to mainstream DRE as the main energy service provider, with large RE acting as a support system. I mean, that's not what many people are thinking about. But if we start thinking along those lines, we can see that many of the other challenges also will get addressed. So at Clean, we are being supported by Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation to create a climate facilitation desk, climate finance facilitation desk actually, through which and this webinar is sort of part of that activity, that we would be working to increase climate literacy among DRE practitioners, engaging with think tanks, bankers, funders, investors, etc., to raise awareness on the potential of DRE as a climate solution, and therefore the need for bringing more climate finance towards DRE, and help develop innovative opportunities also, where financing mechanisms can support the DRE sector moving forward. So from clean and I mean, I speak for our members also, we want to become an important solution provider as a sector, DRE sector. We want to become an important solutions provider for climate ready India, and that is how we are building our DRE focus narrative. And that's the reason why we will be in for the 2024, as many of you may be aware, clean brings out state of DRE sector reports every year. So for 2024, we are going to focus on this link between DRE and climate solutions. So that's it from my side. I just want to remind everyone who is in the meeting that in order to represent the DRE sector, in order to be the voice of the DRE sector, we need all your support. And therefore, if you haven't yet renewed your annual subscription to Clean, please do that. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the session. It is true that only when large RE and decentralized RE will work together, majorly all the problems would get solved. To all the participants, if you have anything, any comment or any question, please mention it in the chat box, or you can raise your hands as well, so that we can take it. I'll wait for 2 minutes. If there is no response, then I think we can
I don't
move.
think there's any question. I think we can move forward and come back in the end.
Okay. Okay. So
Okay.
moving forward, coming to our second speaker, Mr. Prantik Mitra. So a little bit introduction about him. Mr. Mitra is the Director of Strategic and Innovations at Micro Energy Credits and the co-founder of Climate Quantum. He has a decade of experience in climate change mitigation and carbon finance. Mr. Mitra is an architect of the data science team at NEC and headed the development of the credit tracker platform. He is currently leading the engagement of catalyzed the net zero energy among corporates and development economies. He has led cross-functional teams to develop strategies and implementation plans for the first e-booking carbon project to issue credits using the gold standard metered and measured energy device methodology. He is an expert strategist focusing on market expansion, intelligence, and identifying opportunities for innovation and promoting entrepreneurial ecosystem. Talking about his achievements, Mr. Mitra is also a former Micro Create to Inspire Fellow. He was awarded the Emerging Climate Leaders Fellowship by the United Nations University. He is also a part of Climate Reality Project Leader, and he actively speaks about promoting e-cooking and data-based carbon projects. So today, Mr. Mitra will be discussing how carbon finance can support DRE sector and develop high-impact projects. Mr. Mitra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And yeah, hi everyone. So as our MC has mentioned that I am going to take you through about how the DRE sector can become the key to ending the energy poverty in low-income communities and how carbon finance can help DRE sector achieve and scale such high-impact projects. So as we delve into it, I just want to quickly take us through with the process, which primarily takes us how a carbon credit is generated from the DRE sector or usage of distributed renewables. You are using a clean energy product. The low-income household is replacing the fossil fuel-based baseline, which is eventually, because of its continuous use, generates a carbon credit, which is a single ton of CO2 equivalent. Now, there are different gases that emits, or rather the GHGs that emit. All of these are calculated as an equivalent to the carbon's potential of global warming. And then we keep on generating carbon credits for 5 to 7 years, and as long as the product life cycle lasts. So these carbon credits are then sold to corporates, governments, in both in the voluntary and the compliance market, and this becomes the source of carbon finance, which can then be used for scaling the clean energy programs, increasing outreach, catalyzing more private investment. Now, fundamentally, all sorts of clean energy products that are reducing emission has the potential for carbon financing. The methodologies will differ, the standards will have different approaches towards it, the project developers will different approaches, but the principle remains the same. If you're reducing an emission, you're eligible for carbon funding. Conditions to certain levels of integrity and assumptions apply. So you can see there are like electric cook stoves, solar light, efficient biomass, water purifiers. There are more projects coming up like the solar water heaters, solar agricultural devices like solar pumps and solar sprayers, solar cold storage, and not exactly into the DRE, but something that is coming up very actively while we talk about the households or the communities which are the primary consumers of the DRE sector is mostly the rural and the agriculture, and there the biochar projects are coming up significantly. So all of this, and these are not the only ones. There are like several other projects which Dr. Carve had mentioned, and I'm sure the entire Clean Network has an entire buffet of projects which has the potential to access climate uh, financing through the carbon market mechanisms. Now, in this entire scenario, the carbon finance can become the hero that supports the DRE interventions so that the DRE becomes essential in supporting the country's net zero journey. Now, why DRE is important is because the low income communities, which often go under the radar of the government policies and interventions, primarily due to the high cost, the lack of supply chain to the last mile, lack of awareness of the end users or even the suppliers, and lack of capacity to scale this program without a sustainable market-based ecosystem and a steady financial mechanism. So the carbon finance can become that steady support system, which helps reduce all these problems of reducing the high cost of the high upfront cost of renewable energy, financing a supply chain that supports last mile distributions of these clean energy products, supports end user awareness campaigns, product demonstration, teaching them how to use the product correctly, the benefits of the products, and eventually it supports the local economy. Like a a solar powered light can enable a low income household, a mom and pop shop, to operate even in the dark, which they probably would not have been able to do if they had solely relied on electricity, which we know have had its stability issues in remote areas. Now, many of you have been coming across a lot of bad press because the journalists and the researchers have given carbon credits a bad rap. There are the concerns have been over the renewable energy regeneration capacity of forests. There has been concerns over overcrediting, and everybody has been giving this bad press view that carbon credits is only a license to greenwashing, but it's not. Uh, Carbon credits are beneficial to the communities, and if the carbon credits or this carbon financing system goes away, the poor households are the ones who are going to suffer because they would lose access to this clean energy finance. So when we read these bad press about a carbon credit is not does not have integrity, it is not exactly reducing or it is not benefiting the climate, or it's just a license to pollute. Let us sometimes reimagine the villain in the scenario, which is fossil fuels and climate change. Would we want the project where people are having access to solar light, a clean cooking, um, an emission less, pollution less ecosystem and environment, or we would want our country or the rural communities, low income communities, to have images as in this picture where a poor child is sitting with a mother in an indoor kitchen and there is entire pollution going on, or people do not have access to clean water for drinking and cooking purposes, or even the diesel generators are polluting the environment, or there are like other leakages of fossil fuels that is leading to pollution both of land and of the air. So that's the comparison. What climate finance does, or what the carbon market does, is create this system where people do not have to suffer, as against the use of fossil fuels and climate change. So that's the reiterative. Every time we need to, whenever we see this bad press, we need to reiterate ourselves, push us back, take a step back, and reimagine what it would be without the carbon fight. Now, there are differences. I'm not saying these claims are completely false. There are projects which are called high integrity, high social impact projects. And then there are projects where there are serious cases of overcrediting, low integrity, where the benefits are not passed on to the communities. So the crux of the matter remains the same. If you're working on carbon projects, it has to have high integrity and high social impact. And that is what makes these carbon credits, empowers them to fight climate change. So what do we talk about no overcrediting? When we talk about overcrediting, is that there has to be a proper estimation. The robust estimation, there is no inflated baseline. The emissions from kerosene is not overestimated, or the emission reduction from the project interventions, the DRE devices, are not overestimated on the emission reduction calculation. And then we talk about the permanent emission reduction. In the DRE sector, this means that the households do not have, for example, if you have replaced a household with a clean cooking, an electric cooking induction, by replacing their 3-stone firewall, we need to ensure that the household does not revert back to their old mechanisms. Additionally, these carbon projects must support the sustainable development goals. The UN has this entire space of sustainable development goals, 18 sustainable development goals. There are standards of these carbon projects, gold standard, where everybody has their own ways of measuring the sustainable or the social impact. In addition to this, when we talk about social impact and integrity, we need to ensure that the carbon funding goes back to benefit the local communities and supporting the local economies. The carbon funding is not essentially there for profiteering reason. The carbon funding is there to sustain a project, make it sustainable, and then eventually pass on the funding benefits to the communities who are the real owners of this emission reduction. That will help us foster a self-sustaining ecosystem where these households who are using the DRE product or devices become the real owners of this program, becomes the real owners of the emission reduction. And we, the project developers, we as a sector, support them by empowering them on their journey to net zero, which they would not have otherwise done if they would have solely relied on the government interventions to happen. Now, how do we reach this journey when we talk about high integrity credits or high social impact credits? The two key ingredient here is conservativeness and robustness in our approach. So first I'll talk about robustness and robustness of the data tracking, because there are several claims that there are not enough households intervene. There are sometimes the sampling methods are not robust enough when they're doing the monitoring or the verifications of if the household is actually using the product and the emission reduction is actually happening. So the measure has to evolve. The North Star is still achieving 100% data integrity. All the households with the project interventions are tracked on their energy use, and the calculations and measures are happening without any human interferences or without relying on sampling biases. That is what makes a robust data tracking mechanism, something that we are trying to do with the Climate Quantum as a platform. The second is conservativeness in quantification. That means the quantifications of the emission reduction calculation. If you are reducing zero point 0.9 tons of CO2 equivalent from a particular device, it should always be at least 5% discounted, or to some extent 10% discounted if you're solely relying on sampling based measures, because that's the confidence, statistically sensible confidence level to approach when we talk about a conservative quantification approach. So you can never claim, oh, it's 0.9, so let's just call it 1. It's not. If it is 0.9, you better call it 0.8 and then take the approach forward, because there will be cases where if there are 1 million households, at least 5% would have a fall off in the usage rate. There might be 5% on for after sales and maintenance services. There is no double counting, which means the claim from one project is not counted by another project. Now, I'm just focusing on the areas which are primarily relates to the supply side of things for the project developers and the project implementers. There are other aspects of climate carbon credits with integrity approaches, which the ICDC and CCP level calls in, but they are more related for the buyers of carbon credits, which in a way is greenwashing. So when we talk about greenwashing, the governance of carbon credit should also focus on carbon credits are not used as a license to pollute, but are only used to offset those emissions which are not possible by insetting or bringing about a technology change, probably because the technology is way too costly, the technology has not achieved its scale yet, or the technology does not exist. It's a novel technology. We need novel interventions, for example, like cement industries and others. And that's where the effective governance comes in to create on this journey to achieving the high integrity credits. Achieve the governance by the UN committees who would come up with this Article 6, which is basically the market Article 6.2 and 6.4, which is the market-based mechanism or the carbon market system under UN, the remodified version, or rather to be the better version of CDM, if I may call it. Then you have these voluntary standards and the domestic market. This is where the journey of our, perhaps calling the carbon credits the hero on this journey can achieve these superpowers of integrity and social impact. So what the DRE sector needs to do if they need to unlock this carbon funding, because there you would often be approached with project developers, we can create project for you, we can bring in this amount of money. That's not all. That is not the only thing that you need to know when you're talking about carbon markets and carbon projects. Carbon financing has several ways you have to assess the market. You need to know the baseline. You need to understand the budget and the return analysis, and there is no excessive profiteering on it. And when I say budget and return analysis, is the carbon funding necessary to implement or scale the DRE project or that particular project? The carbon funding has to be financially additional and not just something that would have happened under a business as usual scenario. And accordingly, you have to strategize the market. You have to reach out with your sales pitch or value proposition, or more importantly, what is the value for the end users? That can be created through marketing training and creating the budget plan, how the carbon funds can be used, which can eventually be used to focus on the operational implementations of a robust data mechanism, monitoring of the carbon project, need for course correction in the evaluation, performance tests and verification, and eventually the scaling up as we learn from more and more projects. I'll be honest, when we first did our electric cooking induction project, which was first project to issue under gold standards, revised new methodology, we had a lot of learning. We were still learning when we were doing the project. And as we now go into the second issuance, we know what course correction we need to do to implement that project better so that we achieve the top tier integrity and create the best social impact that gives back to the communities and help scale this program by strengthening the local ecosystem. Now, the DRE projects in India have the opportunity to work across 4 different types of markets. I've already spoken about the UN's Article 6, 6.2 and 6.4 market, which is yet to be implemented because the rule books are still being finalized under the UN negotiations expected to happen over the next couple of COPs. Then you also have the international voluntary market, like the gold standard, the beta, which is currently the most functional market. And I think my co-panelists will also touch upon this when we talk about the challenges about the DRE sector. But the international voluntary markets are more like a private market where projects are getting carbon financing for voluntary needs and not because they're compliant to do so. Then you have the India carbon market, the fabled India carbon market, which will come out. We have been engaging a lot, and we have been engaging just my co-panelists, me. We have been engaging with few other think tanks. We have given our responses on including the DRE within the scope and purview with clear indications of what needs to be done or what is expected of the sector under the India carbon market. But the focus of the India carbon market is to help reduce the hard to abate sectors which were originally under the PAC scheme to reduce its emission intensity, and they would be doing so by purchasing or offsetting their emissions by investing in carbon projects in India. Then you also have the domestic offset market, which is like a domestic version of the voluntary market, where corporates who does not fall under the compliance or have met the compliance can do additional carbon offsetting mechanisms because they want to create the good projects. They want to create the climate friendly projects. Now, the implementation of the India carbon market or the domestic market is still in discussion. So as a proponent of carbon financing, clean energy technologies, particularly electric cooking, which I've been talking about a lot these days, I wanted to call the entire clean energy network with a call for action because our effort must nudge the government policies to support climate financing that helps the DRE intervention scale. So as we speak today, there is a parallel stakeholder consultation that the BE is undertaking in Mumbai. There will be another consultation which is due for Delhi over the next couple of weeks, perhaps. So whenever these interventions are coming as the DRE sector, collectively as a sector, we need to contribute and showcase what value that we can add so that the carbon markets that the Indian government is creating becomes an inclusive of mechanism that supports the scaling up of the DRE intervention. Because all of us wants to create the real impact for the communities. Otherwise, it is the poor that suffers, and it is climate finance that can help catalyze a lot of these clean energy investments and mobilization. Because it improves the quality of life, because carbon finance makes renewable energy affordable, much more than what they would have spent on the lifetime on fossil fuels. And thus, we can help together at the Clean Energy Network, we can help end the energy poverty. So on that note, I would want to pause my presentation for any questions related to any of the slides or anything related to the topic that, in case any participants would like to delve into. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Frantic. So we have some questions in the Q&A section. So this is Srinivas who has shared a lot of questions. So would you like to take it now or at the end of the session? I mean, maybe till then you can read all the comments and then.
I think so. I'll need some time to go through the
Yeah, there
questions.
are quite a lot.
Sure.
Okay. So going forward, the last speaker of the session is Mr. Jasmeet Singh Bajaj. He's the co-founder and director of FCF India. He has over 15 years of dynamic experience in carbon markets across advisory, auditing, trading, and project development. He has a track record of success in over 200 carbon projects spanning multiple standards, including Pan Vivo, Gold Standards, Fair Trade, Climate Standards, and VERA. He's also co-author of carbon credit and climate change nexus and equipped with an MBA in power management. Mr. Jasmeet has an acute grasp of the climate finance nexus. He is committed to crafting top-tier climate projects that prioritize the welfare of vulnerable communities in the developing world. Mr. Jasmeet will be talking on challenges of DRE to assess the carbon finance. Mr. Jasmeet, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much for providing the opportunity and sharing my thoughts on the challenges. So let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yes, it is visible, but it's in the presentation mode yet.
Yeah. So, like I heard both the presentations of Dr. Carvey and from Microenergy Credits, my fellow speaker, Pranithik. So the idea is definitely there is the opportunity of carbon finance and there is a climate crisis narrative and the policies are in place. But still, right now we have a participants of 39 and 40. I'm still, if I ask the question, how many are actually able to realize the carbon credits and they are aware about. So very little handful people will raise their hands and say that yes, we are aware if they have received or they are know about any particular organization who are accessing the carbon finance and benefited about it. So that was the reason we picked the topic of the challenges rather than always looking forward that these are the opportunities which we want to focus on. So the way I have structured my presentation today is focusing very briefly about what FCF India is working on and what are the specific challenges for DRE. Why DRE so far in last 20 years when we have almost more than a decade has dedicated to renewable energy segments. So decentralized renewable energy access is not able to crack the carbon finance. Whereas the utility scale projects like solar, wind, small hydros has received in a different phases decent benefits towards the carbon finance. So with that, I'll move to what exactly FCF India stands for. So we are working with two missions, and I always present this like a two customers. One customer is the smallholder farmer, which exist in the extreme end of one lifestyle in any vulnerable settings, whether it's India, Bangladesh, Africa region, or Latin America. And the other set of customers are which exist in the another extreme end of the lifestyle. It's the Fortune 500 companies, which are private sector businesses. So carbon market is very uniquely structured to connect both the ends. And as FCF India is in a mission to build the climate resilience for the smallholder farmers who are contributing 35% of the global food requirement, and still they are fighting the battle for their survival because of the extreme weather conditions. And the second part is inspiring and empowering the businesses, the ones who are doing the economic growth in the regions, making our life more smooth, but on the same time also negatively impacting the nature and the environment, how they can take more responsible climate actions. So if these two customers able to talk to each other, they will able to contribute impact wise, business wise, both win-win propositions. And we are working with this particular mission. Our approach of implementations, carbon projects, whether it's the DRE segments, renewable energy, smallholder farmers, we follow three principles, which we call fair, inclusive, and transparent. So fairness represent if a carbon price started in New York or in Amsterdam at $20, how much it is actually reaching to the ground, to the smallholder farmer or to a cook stove user or to any other DRE beneficiary who is working on some renewable energy applications. So what we are on a mission that we have to design the programs in a way that we are able to mobilize at least 60% of financing to those communities. Right now, the mechanism is very opaque. Whether it is reaching 90% or 10%, it is on the independent, it's on the private reporting by the project developers, but it cannot be cross-checked in a very transparent way. So that's we are stand for the fairness in the market. Inclusiveness. Inclusiveness is the one who is generating the carbon credit. How they can be assured to be part of the system of decision making. If a DRE based in Jharkhand, Odisha, and working on solar irrigation pumping, how they are also participate in the carbon market where they have a role of decision making. At this moment, there are intermediaries, consultants, and different trading houses who are structuring these projects in one platform. But the decision making is belongs to them, whereas the ownership of carbon credits belongs to the local enterprises, which they transfer to those platforms. So the inclusiveness angle become comparatively weak. So once you build their capacity, give them the informed decision in a fair and inclusive way, that's we call inclusiveness. And the transparency. Transparency, whether it comes with the data, transparency when it comes with the carbon pricings, that where these carbon credits are coming from and who will going to purchase at what price. So the whole value chain of the carbon markets can be transparent, which can be cross-checked, verified by anybody. And it's not on year-on-year basis. If somebody wanted to check 5 years back, somebody has purchased the credits and sold to XYZ organizations, how they can make it with the use of technology, where the data will be secured in more robust and independent way. So that's the ethical practices of the carbon markets, where FCF India, any project we design, we focus on fair and inclusive and transparent approach. Talking about different complexities which exist in the carbon markets, when we have to start a carbon project with a solar irrigation pumping of different DREs, there are a lot of technical jargons, questions asked. So we have given a very quick snippets of this different prominent methodologies which exist right now in the market. One we call CDM, which is the very traditional and governed by the United Nations, and they are the one which established by during the period of Kyoto Protocol. Second is a VCS program under VERA. It's a certification body based in US, Voluntary Carbon Standard. The third category is the Gold Standard, which is also a non-for-profit organization formed to promote SDGs, social development goals, along with doing the climate action. The fourth one is the Plan Vivo, which is a UK-based certification body, which focusing more on the smallholder, restoring the smallholder barren lands and degraded lands. And the last but not the least is the Fair Trade Climate Standard, that how a fair wages can be provided to the communities. As FCF India, we try to design and develop as much as projects in a fair trade climate standard. If it's not a label, then we want to follow the principles. If we are developing these projects in Gold Standard, VCS, Plan Vivo, in which particular standard. A quick comparison is on the transparency part, that which certification standards make it mandatory and make it good to have practices on the reliability. All are following in the same lines. Participation of stakeholders is where how strict guidelines they are. But in the current scenario, all the certifications are striving to build more robust monitoring plans. So this particular assessment, what we have done is few time back. So certain programs start taking into consideration that how they will bring more strict, stringent guidelines, so that all the stakeholders involved in the project should be participate in the design, implementation of the program. Local communities own carbon credits. So these are a very important point. that whether a private company can own those carbon credits in CDM, yes, in VCS, yes, gold standard, yes. But when we come to Plan Vivo and fair trade, no private company can own the carbon credits. It will be owned by the local communities. They have to form a cooperative federation or any democratic structure to establish a carbon certification process. Similarly, for the benefit sharing mechanism, which certification standards keep it open-ended and not very specific that how much it needs to go. So these are the comparative guidelines. And if any clean member wanted to design and develop a carbon project, they can take a stock of the different certification requirements, which one is going to meet better as per their design and the demography and the kind of stakeholders they are going to deal with. So this is my last slide, and I'm going to spend some time that why DRE sector so far not able to mobilize significant amount of carbon finance. So there are 6 pointers which we need to take into consideration when we have to design and develop a project, and that's becoming the challenge for the DRE. So I will start with the first point is that is the scale. If we are talking about the scale of the project, that and the current certification guidelines, that's make a significant gap to make the project financially viable or not. So if we talk about a renewable energy, we will talk about 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt of solar power plants. But when we talk about the DRE applications, these are on a cluster-based approach and segregated in a different time horizon. They will reach a significant scale, but not on the day one when we have to start. And when one small DRE enterprise wanted to design and develop a carbon project, the visualization of the scale is very difficult because they are serving to a very fragmented market. So that's becoming one of the challenge so far. If we are talking about the cold storage system, how many cold storage and when they are going to convert into the megawatt kind of capacity. So for that, it's becoming a challenge. Second, which I touch a lot about the timelines. If we are starting a project with a bigger scale, we need the horizon of next 2 to 3 years. We reach to a 100% of our projected capacity. For an example, if we talk about that the project is going to make the scale of a project of 10 megawatt renewable energy is going to make a financial viability. So for DRE, that becoming the same, that 10 megawatt DRE composition is required. So for 10 megawatt, the systems typically comes with the capacity of 50 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts. So that timeline of their scaling up operations becoming very challenging, that they are giving a forecast of next 5 to 7 years to reach the 100% capacity. And that makes the break even a bit on the later stage of the implementation plan. So timeline becoming one of the challenges that why for reaching the full capacity. SDG indicator is one of the consideration, but I believe DRE segment is well above the required conditions, that how it is going to improve the livelihoods, how the gender, the health well-being, and the other job creation facilities. So that's, I will not say a significant challenge for the DRE, but it's a good consideration. And definitely when we going to design DRE carbon programs, SDG indicators going to give a better scoring in that format. There is an initial cost when we have to design the projects in a decent scale. So if the DRE segment, the distributed or decentralized enterprises are comparatively small scale in nature, so the initial cost of the certification becoming one of the barrier that who will going to invest into these projects. And in case they have to work out with the other project stakeholders, because a good amount of technical know-how is also important at what stage when they are piloting certain implementation plan, or if they are scaling up their DRE enterprises, then they might not be eligible for entering into the voluntary carbon markets. So these are the technical know-how which the organization or the founder or the DRE enterprises who are leading it need to know from in the initial days of the implementation plan. Last consideration for the carbon finance is the government policies. There is a lot of volatility. We are talking about international mechanisms. We are talking about the government policies, and government policies are also not at a central level, at the state level, and different subsidy schemes going to work, and on what conditions these credits are be eligible, whether these credits are going to be purchased by the local corporates, government will allow, or how much taxations are going to be applicable. So all these questions to answer these questions in a more robust way is not possible at the moment, which creates more hindrance for a small scale interventions steered by the DRE sector. That if we are talking about a sole DRE which is serving multiple livelihood opportunities like a handloom, irrigation pumping, and cold storage, they are not cannot be combined in one kind of a setup if the policy is not giving that kind of directions. So these are the certain considerations which becoming the challenges for the DRE to access the carbon finance at the moment. But yes, the policies also has the key to reduce the scale of for the DRE segment only, or that reduce the timelines or make more provisionings as the domestic voluntary carbon market is under development, which as far as the information available, it is not addressing 100% the requirement or the barriers which I have talked about right now about the DRE segment. But still, the government policies has a significant role to play if an individual farmer or an individual small enterprises which is saving certain amount of carbon, but they cannot certify it because of the cost, because of the timelines and the technical know-how, how that benefit can be passed it on to that particular enterprise, then that is something needs to be addressed by the development and the government channels only, because the private sector right now already moving in that direction, able to provide the beneficial carbon financing to their particular isolated support. But when it's come to the serving to the vulnerable communities below poverty line, then definitely the government policy has to make a path so that they can also give access to the carbon finance to these communities. I guess this is the last. Yeah, I stop here. Happy to answer the questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jaspreet. Priyadarshini ma'am, would you like to share some comment on the session, or should we start with the Q&A?
I think let's answer the questions because some very important questions have come. So
Yeah.
let's get into that.
Okay. So there are questions and comments both in the chat and in the question and answer box. So I think some are also answered by Mr. Jasmeet and Mr. Prantik.
So I can probably take some of the questions which I feel I
Yeah,
can answer on the carbon
Yeah.
market, and maybe Jasmeet can chime in where he feels to add more.
Yes.
And I will probably leave the DRE specific questions on resilience and adaptation probably to the people who are more experts on adaptations and resilience, and that's not exactly my area of expertise. So in terms of, I think the first question is in terms of the price volatility in terms of clean cooking. So in my presentation, I talked about the bad press, and that has been the main reason why a lot of these price volatility is happening. In addition to the fluctuating FedEx rates in the United States, which has caused an overall slump in the economic growth in the across the globe worldwide. Now, coming to whether the prices will improve, uh, it is expected that the prices will improve as more of these integrity standards like the ICDCM, CCP core carbon principle labels come in. The Article 6 market comes in, people are already willing to pay better prices for corresponding adjustments, where the government of a country is allowing the project developers to do the projects, and they are waiving off the rights to be using that emission reduction in their NDC. That's what a corresponding adjustment is. You are correspondingly adjusting the emission reduction that has happened in your country to somebody that has already claimed it, and you're not claiming it in your NDC. So a letter of approval with a corresponding adjustment definitely fetches a price that is almost, if I say the average price right now is $4 to $5, similar projects can fetch something between $20 to $25 in the compliance Article 6 market. For the voluntary market, it solely depends on the integrity standards, how well the integrity standards are absorbed. There are already projects. We already saw a project by EcoSafi in Kenya, which is a clean cookstove project. They claimed 5,000 credits have been sold for almost $30, which is like 6 times the price of today. So that is happening because of using the more advanced methodologies, taking data-centric approach, making 100% data verifiable. And so developing this project does take cost, and therefore the prices also needs to be up there to meet the integrity standards. So it's a question of demand and supply. If the buyers of these carbon credits are willing to pay more price, I don't think so there would be problem for the developers to address these integrity concerns. Even the project developers who probably have some of the projects overclaimed or as has been claimed. I don't want to get into the controversy, but that is how it has been claimed by several of the rating agencies like B0 and others. So that is what I can give you a picture on the pricing projection. Obviously, I cannot give you what the price would be from 6 months from now, but we can expect it to rise and the market to improve as the integrity standards and the compliance market. The second is probably the Indian carbon market affects the voluntary market. No, that is not what we are expecting as of now. It's still a wait and watch scenario for all of us on how the rules of the Indian carbon market is actually finalized. That's why these are the questions that's very important while the stakeholder consultations are taking place. But as of now, we are not expecting any impact. These are like parallel markets. So voluntary market will continue to function until and unless India government clearly specifies that no projects established in India can export. That is never specified, and until that is clearly specified in the law, we are not expecting any problem. The India carbon market would be compliant based. How does it affect the long-term existing of the voluntary? I think this answers the same thing. It's a two parallel markets. One does not affect the other as the scenario stands today. And in terms of centralized DRE repository for projects, if you're talking about the project that have received carbon funding and not climate funding, which the question says, we can look into the small scale projects or distributed renewable projects in the registries like VERA and Gold Standard. They have their registries. We can always you can type the type of technology, you can select the technologies, etc. So that can actually help you get into a registry. There is no central registry as such. Here, the different standards maintains their own registry. World Bank is working towards creating a universal central registry, which is in progress under the Climate Action Data. Did I miss any question on the carbon yet? I think I answered a couple of questions already through text in terms of the links and everything which I could share. And in case on the VCM, is there a list of project developers with whom Tech EIA can approach? You can see the list of project developers in the registry itself. Just means FCF develops their project, NEC develops our own projects. There are several other project developers that does that. And in terms of the methodology question on the VCM, there is not one single methodology for all DRE. The principle, whereas the principle remains the same for reduction-based projects, there are also removal-based projects like forestry and afforestation. So specific project intervention must follow the methodology that is most appropriate to them for that particular type of project interventions and results that they're seeking. So you can look into most of these, follow the CDM methodologies, which you can look up. It's publicly available, and even the gold standard and Vera methodologies are also publicly available in PDF for everybody. I guess I'll pause. In case there are any questions, feel free to point me to it so that I can answer them.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mitra. If Mr. Jasmeet has anything to add or take the questions.
Yeah, there are, I think, some questions. So I'm just not going by in the same order, just picking up, which I guess is not yet answered. But in case I miss something, you can raise your hand or make the point. So the point is related to, there is a question related where a DRE wanted to install his water purification plants based on the solar energy of 15 kilowatt, and the capital requirement is discouraging the enterprise to work on. So definitely there is a opportunity for such kind of interventions to take into consideration and implement the carbon project, and not 100%, but certain portion can be subsidized through carbon finance, because it is very highly impactful area to work on. The only challenge which I have also covered in the slide is the scale. If we are talking about one system in a village and 15 kilowatt, that will not going to make commercial sense to move towards carbon certification and do all that data management and work. But if we are having similar thousands in thousands similar systems, then definitely there is a one organization or a cooperative or a some kind of entity which is connected with all such enterprises of the DRE, and making a one carbon project in which the implementation of solar based water purification systems in the villages at a thousand numbers of level, then definitely it makes sense. Whether it is going to reduce the commercial burden by 10%, 15 or 50%, that is something the analysis needs to take into consideration based on the baseline emissions. There is a question, is there any existing retired project in India where cooperatives or farmers have owned the credits via VCM? So FCF India is working on fair trade carbon projects. And I just give very quick example. So in Odisha, we are working with approximately 15,000 women who are and providing clean cooking, improved cook stoves. So instead of owning the credits belongs to FCF India, we becomes only the project facilitator. And these 15,000 women has to create a separate legal entity, which we called RASOI. So ROSEI, RASOI has been registered as a separate federation entity, and that particular entity is owning the carbon credits. So they have already generated 5,000 carbon credits. So if till the time FCF India or any other organization is providing the competitive services to RASOI, they will continue taking those services till the time we are not providing the sharp services, better pricings, and the transparency. They have the authority to change FCF India. Though we conceive the project, but the design of the project in a way that the ownership still belongs to the local communities, and the capacity building exercise and everything come into picture. So with this setup, we able to fetch better pricings, and also able to communicate to the buyer that why this particular credits needs 25 euros when the market pricings, as uh, my fellow speaker Mr. Mitra mentioned, at $4 to $5 is happening, but still we are able to fetch better 4 or 5 time pricings for those cook stoves, because we are not saying that the money will reach to FCF India or any other organizations, we will recover our expenses, and Rasoi has a separate bank account which the buyers can transfer the funds, and that amount will be utilizing for their climate change adaptation needs. So there are very handful example for such projects because it takes additional efforts to design and develop it. But once you establish the system, it also brings the good color of carbon markets, that what the development looks like. And tomorrow FCF India exit, Rasoi still exist and do other livelihood activities. There is a remark, can we build capacities of DRE tech developers? Yes, that I completely resonate with that. That the intermediaries. So we need to work in a system where organization like FCF India should not exist. A buyer and a farmer or a individuals can interact. Till the time those are not, so we are the working like a enabler. But in a ideal scenario, the buyer or company like Microsoft should able to interact directly with the farmer and able to check the impact and transfer the funds in their account. So rest all are like the institutions who will take very smaller margin to translate, give the services and translate. Right now, that's not the setup of the ecosystem is, but looking forward for 5, 10, 15, I don't know how much time it takes, but we need to improve the efficiency and reduce the intermediaries cost as much as possible. There is a question on what are the behavioral changes on the cook stoves. So cook stove project, I strongly communicate if anybody is developing a carbon cook stove, whether it's induction or a biomass, it's not about distribution assignment. Distribution is just a 20 to 30% of the total work. There is a significant amount of initial assessment which needs to take into consideration. And I believe most of the problem is selection of the households. If you are not selecting the household with a very diligent manner, your project will bound to get into the same trap that the household is not using it. They are using the baseline stove, or they are using it, but they sold to someone else at a because it's a subsidy. Because of the selection strategy and the information in a fair, inclusive, and transparent way needs to be done, and then onboarded those households. But it takes 6 to 9 months of the time before the implementation or distribution starts. And because of the hurry for our own commercial interest, we tend to give less importance to this capacity building exercise and immediately put up a camp and distribute the cook stoves like this is the only cost which we have to take into consideration. So selection of the household is something I would emphasize, which makes the capacity building, mobilization, and the requirement more transparent. And that's what strategy so far we are right now focusing on. Mr. Mitra has raised and maybe he wanted to add something.
So just on this question on the cook stoves, because when I was talking about the learnings when we were doing the electric induction cook stove programs, what we realized, the primary thing while we develop the capacity, it's also important to have the continuous engagement with the end users so that they are continuously using the cook stove. I used to go to the field even couple of years back or few years back, I was doing this, and that time we were doing solar lights program. And during a training, we have been asked questions like, this particular has the option to charge with the USB cord, which was the old mobile USB cords. Can we charge it without having the solar panel? I'm like, no, that defeats the purpose, and that does not save you the electricity bill that of the whole value proposition. So those kind of engagement. And now I am saying this when the person is probably taking or getting introduced to the product. And we are working with a scale of 10 million people. We work with a network of these clean energy leaders who needs to have this continuous engagement with groups of 20, 25 people to remind them of the benefit, the proper usage, and what are the harmful effects of using that fossil fuel. So those while selection of the household is very important. You do not select a household that's in an urban area and does not need an climate finance intervention. Uh, the project becomes sustainable if you are actually continuously engaging with the end user. So that creates this entire system where they are the owners of this fund. So that's the point that I wanted to add to this week's.
A couple of points. I mean, I think Prantik already talked about the pricing issue. In a way, this whole pricing thing has happened because of the failure of the Kyoto Protocol, and that is why the entire CDM sort of lost its value. And we are in a vacuum situation where the carbon market under Paris Agreement is yet to be activated fully. So that is why we see this sort of uncertainty right now. But we still have a long way to go to address climate change. So these are just early days as far as Paris Agreement is concerned. But eh, I think I want to add to this that although the discussion today has focused more or less on the carbon market, climate finance is much more than just sale of carbon credits. What is happening increasingly is that even if you look at CSR funding, for example, the criteria to be met, one of the criterias many times coming up is how much carbon emission reduction is being delivered. So even though it is not a sale of carbon credits, if a project is delivering reduction in carbon emissions, that sort of gives it a weightage which makes it more eligible to access that kind of funding available. Or even investment, investors would look for investing in business models which are contributing to mitigation or adaptation or resilience building. So there are these variety of indirect ways in which the climate considerations are impacting the finance that the finance pool that the DRE systems look at. And from that perspective also, I think it is important for the sector to understand the basic principles and fundamentals of how their interventions are interacting with climate change. I think somebody had also asked this question, that what about DRE systems causing climate change impacts? Yes, to some extent that can also happen, and in fact that is something which we would like to address this time through the state of sector report, where we will try to bring together some examples with at least back of the envelope calculations showing how positive negative way DRE systems are impacting the overall climate scenario. And let's see what emerges from that, because a lot of this data is missing. We don't have documentation beyond projects which have actually gone for carbon market, but there are so many other DRE projects which also have had climate change related impacts, but those have never been counted or documented. So if we start making that as a common practice, that this is what we are going to do and these are the climate change related impacts, then we sort of in a way integrate the climate language in our value propositions, in our marketing pitches and so on. Then that link will start becoming obvious to more people also. And to an extent, I think, I mean, I may be wrong, but I somehow I have this gut feeling that we need to look beyond the only the carbon market frameworks. There are many more things that are happening out there where making this link with climate change will benefit us financially. And also, I mean, people are becoming more aware. As I said, DRE is no longer just products. DRE products are no longer our clients are not just donors, or our users are not just rural communities. Urban people consciously are moving towards low carbon lifestyles, and that is a market segment which also can be tapped into by the DRE sector, and that in a way is happening because of the overall climate change discourse. So that also a form of climate finance. So we also have to think in a more open and imaginative way, I feel. So these are the finer nuances which we hope that we will be able to bring out time to time through these discussions. And some of the questions, in fact, give a good insight into how the sector practitioners, the stakeholders are thinking, and we'll try to address some of these issues more in depth as we go forward through this webinar. And very soon we are also going to be launching a series of podcasts with customized energy solution and clean. Jointly we will be starting monthly podcasts also. So some of these issues we'll try to address through both these platforms. If there are any burning questions that we left out, Gitanjali, if you can point out, otherwise we can close the session.
I think mostly have been answered, and Mr. Mitra and Jasmeet ji has also been answering in the comments. If anybody has any other question, they can also raise their hands. I think instead of just putting it in the chat box.
And you can always reach out to us on email with your questions and suggestions for topics to cover in the webinars, so that we address the concerns that are there in your minds. Yeah.
I have also shared the speakers' LinkedIn profiles. Initially, I'll share it again with everyone.
And I think somebody was asking about the recording, etc. So recordings of the webinar are, I mean, this will be edited a bit and uploaded on Clean's YouTube channel. So keep tracking the YouTube channel. We'll also, of course, in the WhatsApp group, we'll announce when the recording gets uploaded. But all the webinar recordings are available on the YouTube channel also.
Okay, I think everything is done. Questions are answered, and we are happy now. Thank you for somebody has commented something. Link for WhatsApp group, ma'am.
Yeah, sure. You can join the WhatsApp group, but do you have the link handy, Gitanjali?
No.
Or if you can just drop an email
Yes.
to me, I'll just put my email address there. So WhatsApp group is for everyone who is active in the DRE sector. But if you are working in the DRE sector, you should become a member of the Clean Network and contribute more productively to that.
Yes, ma'am has shared her email address. Please feel free to reach with queries or any suggestion or willingness to join the group. And I think we can end the session here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Prantik and Jasmeet, for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Karve. Thank you, everyone.
Valuable insights.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.